Dr. B.A.Saheb Ambedkar Open University.
Welcome to Dr. B.A.Saheb Ambedkar Open University online sessions. Today we are going to discuss compulsory English block 2 unit number 6. The unit number 6 is about the story of the shroud. The shroud is the story that is written by Munshi Premchand. So let us discuss today compulsory English block 2 unit 6. Here it is, the topic is written over here, dear students. You can read that topic, the shroud. I am Assistant Professor Dr. Ushma A. Bhatt over here to teach you about the story of the shroud, block number 2, unit number 6, compulsory English. So let us start the functioning of the short story. What is the genre of short story? How the story works, what is in the story, the summary of the story, and the thematic part, and every particular information regarding the story. So let's start learning it. Look, first of all, we should learn what is actually the definition of the short story. The short story is an interesting literary genre of literature. There are many genres, as you know. There are the genres of epic, drama, poetry, poems, rhythmic poetry, lyrical verses, ballads, and in the same way here we are supposed to learn the short story. The short story is an imaginary prose with a few characters and single event. The story ends with a sudden twist, conclusion, or a shocking end. Look, the short story is discussed as an imaginary prose, just like the novel or just like the form of novella. In the same way, the short story deals with the fictional element. That's why it is written over here, the imaginary prose. There are few characters. As in novel, there are hundreds of characters, or we can say multitudes of characters, plenty of characters. But in short story, there may be 2, 3, or 4, or maybe 2, 3 little characters, little number of characters, and single event. One single event of a day or 2 days that ends with a sudden twist, conclusion, or a shocking end. This is the main important part of the short story that you need to learn, that it is a discussion about one single event. It's not a long description of 2, 3 years, or maybe 4, 5, 6 years, or just like novels when there are 2 parts. As you know, in Virginia Woolf, To the Lighthouse, the novel of Virginia Woolf, there are 2 parts, part 1 and part 2. But this is a short story, and most of the short stories have this particular feature of short, small ending, either a short, small, one particular event with single little bit characters. Look, characters are lifelike. The most important thing is most of the characters in short stories are very lively. You feel as if they are in your daily day-to-day life, as if you are meeting them, discussing them, talking about them. This is a very lively element of the short story. Setting, the description of the story helps the readers to visualize it. Look, the setting of the short story is such a beautiful setting that you can visualize that. As for example, I give you the example of R.K. Narayan. He had written many short stories in his book, The Malgudi Days. And there are certain short stories of Swami and his friends also. He is an Indian English writer, if you know R.K. Narayan. In the same way, you might have heard the name of Indian English short stories of Gurudev Tagore, Shri Rabindranath Tagore. So in most of these people, these great people's, great persons' short stories, there are beautiful settings. The settings are presented in such a way so that you can write a big answer about the setting also. The description of the story helps the readers to visualize it. Look, it happens actually in R.K. Narayan's Malgudi Days. When you read the short stories of Malgudi Days, you will certainly remember the place of Malgudi, the village of Malgudi, how the houses were described over there, how the people were living, how Swami and their friends were living. Certain things you can discuss in setting. Then there is an important matter of theme. The central idea and the main belief, the main message the author wants to suggest. Look, the most important integral part, or we can say the fundamental part, the primary part, important part of the short story is about the thematic ideology. The short story could be considered as a moral lesson, as a part of moral understanding. It could be told or learned for the moral teaching also. Just like a Aesop story, if you know the name of Aesop's stories, or if you have heard when you were children, you might have heard the name of Panchatantra stories. Vishnugupta, he was the guru, and he had been providing the knowledge to four princes of the king. They were very dullard and they wanted to be learnt, and that's why Vishnugupta was providing them stories of Panchatantra. So this is why this happened. The stories were of animals, but behind these stories of Panchatantra there was actually the theme that could be learnt, that could be given to those princes who were very much dull. So in that way the parts of short story works over here. These are the parts of the short stories that which you are looking over here: characters, setting, theme, of course the plot. The plot is also an important part. Plot could be taken as a story. As the action develops in the story, the plot goes on. The Shroud is a short story written by Munshi Premchand. I think you know the name of Munshi Premchand ji. I must tell him he is Munshi Premchand ji because he is the greatest Hindi writers. Of course, you people are the students of English literature, or maybe you are studying compulsory English with your main subjects. You should know the great national writer. Out of some of the national writers, some of the predominant writers, some of the popular writers, he is one of them. His genuine real name is Dhanpat Rai, and he was born in 31st of July 1886. His birthplace is Lamhi near Varanasi in Uttar Pradesh. So he was the person of Uttar Pradesh. And I think you know Munshi Premchand ji was very much famous for his work Nirmala and Godan. And there was one Gaban, yes. These were the three great works. Nirmala was one of the Upanyas. It was a Hindi novel which was very famous. Previously there was one television serial which was also coming on that particular novel Nirmala. When I was a small young child, I had seen that television serial of Nirmala. It's very pitiful, we can say. It is very emotional kind of a story which Premchand ji had written. Premchand ji, a voracious reader, editor and press owner. He had remained the greedy reader, the best reader. We can say he was having the fond of reading literature. And the Shroud is translated by English writer Francis W. Pritchard. Look, the name written over here is about the translated version, that is the story Shroud. The actual Shroud story, the Shroud, is written actually by Munshi Premchand ji in Hindi, and it was named as Kafan. Kafan was the actual name of that story, and it's very much emotional kind of a story. The story of harshness and morbid comic effect. Look, the story, I think now we should go for the story. After this much understanding of the short story, the understanding of the actual writer Munshi Premchand ji, understanding of the translated version of that short story, The Shroud, and its real title in Hindi that you must mention in your write-ups, in your answers or in your assignments. That Shroud is known to be the original, it is known to be the translated version of the original story Kafan. Let's go for the original story. Look, the Shroud, it is known to be the last story. The original title is Kafan in Hindi, as I told you. The story is about two Dalit persons, Kishu and Madhav. And there is one female character, Budhiya. Budhiya was Madhav's wife. She was pregnant. And Kishu is Madhav's father. Kishu is father and Madhav is Kishu's son. So this is the story of father, son and son's wife. Three characters. There are three main characters, Kishu, Madhav and Budhiya. The summary starts now. You must learn the summary. Kishu and Madhav, they were very wretched, poor Dalit people. They were coming from the Chamar family, and India was very much bound under the strong caste system. That's what Premchand ji wanted to show over here. Budhiya was actually, Kishu and Madhav were very wretched and poor. They did not have anything to eat at their home. They were living in a small hut, and the hut was completely empty. There wasn't anything in the hut because they weren't having any money or any education. They were completely rustic, poor, downtrodden, underprivileged, and we can say they were the Dalits. So naturally they were suffering a lot due to their caste system also. And Budhiya was Madhav's wife. She had married 1 year ago to Madhav, and afterwards she got pregnant, and she was right now going in the last stage of her pregnancy, and she was suffering from acute labor pain. She was inside the hut. Both these person, Kishu and Madhav, they listened her screamings because she was suffering a lot due to acute pain and her pregnancy and her last stage of pregnancy. She could not survive and she was suffering a lot, and she was suffering from the labor pain, and that is why she was screaming a lot. And both these Madhav and Kishu, they were discussing outside the hut. Kishu told Madhav that I think she would die soon, as today is a long big day. She had been screaming for the whole long day. It might happen that today night she might die. And Madhav also said yes, that yes, she might die. Both were at that time when Budhiya was on her deathbed. She was going to die soon. At that time, both this father and son, means Budhiya's husband and her father-in-law, they were devouring potatoes. They were eating roasted potatoes which they had stolen from someone else's farm. Madhav avoided to go inside. Kishu remembered the feast which happened 20 years ago. Kishu told Madhav that you should go, it is your wife, you had remained her husband for 1 year, 1 whole year, and you should take care of her, whether is she dying or is she in her last stage or what happened. You must go inside the hut and you should see whether what happens. But Madhav, such a negligent poor, such a dumb, I think it is the best word for him, because he is dumb, he is uneducated, he isn't having any emotions, and due to poverty and due to extreme hunger. Hunger is also one kind of thing that makes the person to do the crime. There is a saying in Sanskrit, if you have heard, bubukshitam kim na karoti papam. So this is the main thing behind Madhav and Gishu's crime, behind Madhav and Gishu's indifference towards Budhiya. Gishu told Madhav to go inside and see what happened to your wife, what happens to Budhiya, but Madhav indifferently neglected and denied that he would not go, because he said that as she is going to die at night, it might happen that she would die soon. Why should I go inside and waste my time? Rather than, it is better that I eat roasted potatoes with you. Madhav was quite worried that if he would go inside and see the wife, during that period of time his father might eat more potatoes in compared to him. So due to that lust of eating potatoes, he avoided to go inside and see his dying wife. This is the most, we can say, most uh, disappointing feeling that happens in this particular story. Kishu remembered the feast. Look, as she is going to die soon, the wife is on the deathbed. Madhav's wife is on the deathbed, and Madhav and Gishu both were discussing about the superb feast that had happened 20 years ago. A landowner's house. At the landowner's house, when the landowner had kept the festival for his daughter's marriage, at that time they had eaten puris and sabjis and vegetables and many sweets and all these things and liqueurs. All those things they were trying to remember right now when she was going to die. So this is actually merely a very critical thing. We can say that it is very shameful thing. But why this happens? Because these Kishu and Mother were actually indifferent, and they were not able to understand the reality of the situation. Though they were indifferent, though they were Dalit, though they were poor, though they were rustic, all these things are true. But why this happens? Because it is the part of Indian caste system. The upper class society of the Indian culture, they had always kept the underprivileged people not to take the knowledge, not to be kind enough, not to get money, not to be happy. All these things were totally kept aside to the downtrodden, to the underprivileged, to the middle, to the lower class people. So this is the actual scenario which is shown in Premchandji's story. Now look again what happens after some time. 20 years ago they were discussing the superb feast. New people do not spend, thrifty and economic, all these things these two Madhav and Gishu were discussing when she was screaming inside the hut and she was going to die at that time. Madhav and Gishu were unconcerned towards Budhia's pain. Gishu told his son to go inside and see what happens to her. Kishu forced Madhav to go inside, but Madhav said, as she is going to die, it's of no use going to see her. The next day, Budhia dies. Truly, she dies. And the things that was not going to happen, that happened. The most emotional part comes over here. The laziness and poverty and hunger and starving, still they did not like to work. All these things, due to laziness, due to poverty, due to hunger and due to starvation, the two characters Madhav and Gishu were not ready to work. They were lazy from the very beginning. They were poor from the very beginning, from their young age. Madhav and Gishu both. Gishu was the father. He also had seen the poverty, and Madhav had also born and brought up in poverty. But the bonding of this father and son was that much strong that they were accustomed not to work. Though they were provided many kinds of works by the farmers of the village, but they always denied to work. They wasted their time in sitting, discussing, taking rest, and discussing that how they could be spoiled out, how they could be exploited by the people. So this is the actual thing that happened to the underprivileged people. Premchandji wanted to show that why the Dalits were suffering a lot. Because of the Indian caste system, because of the starvation, because of the poverty, because of that hunger, because of the laziness, they had become dumb enough and they had become emotionless, and that's why they had become staunch enough not to feel the guilt about the death that was going to happen also. So Premchandji is very sure over here. He is known to be the person who had written this story. It is known to be the anti-Dalit story, but it is not the anti-Dalit story. It is the actual reality of the Dalit people, how they had suffered and why they had become this much dumb enough. Even they could not feel the guilt, or even they could not feel the emotions of the death of their fellow being. It is because of that dumbness, and that dumbness was the actual outcome of the Indian caste system that had been coming out from the chronological period of time. Now look, let's go for the next slide. Madhav reminded that even she died, she provided the fist-like meal to them. Now look, as this Budhia died, both these Gishu and Madhav, they saw that, oh, she died, and they started screaming loudly, and they started crying, and people gathered, and then they went back to the zamindar, and they asked the zamindar that, look, this my wife has died, so you please give me some money. Gishu remarked that, and as she had died, please provide us some money. And Gishu and Madhav both were having that charity kind of 5 rupees for that shroud. Shroud is known to be the coffin which could be covered on that dead body, and they could go for the cremation, and they could do the funeral of the dead body. But unfortunately, and it is an unfortunate thing about Budhia, that she could not get that coffin, she could not get that shroud out of that 5 rupees, and that 5 rupees were spent by Gishu and Madhav for the feast. They went to buy the shroud, but shroud was very costly, so they decided that, okay, as she had lived the whole life without any proper cloth, so it's okay if she dies without the shroud. Let's go and put this money in the feast. And they bought some drink bottles of soft drinks and hard drinks, and they bought the meat, and they bought the roasted eggs and food, all the kinds of food, and all these things they decided, and they wasted the money of 5 rupees on that feast instead of buying the shroud for the dead body. So Gishu and Madhav both were discussing that though she died, she had given us the beautiful meal, she had provided us the feast like meal to us. Gishu remarked that Budhia had earned religious merits. Kishu said that because we too are eating this much food because of her death, so she would ultimately get the religious peace, and she would be happily, her soul would be very much happy. In that way they were discussing, her soul would go to heaven. The people witnessed the spectacle of the two singing, jumping and dancing out of intoxication. Look, the two, Madhav and Gishu, they ate a lot of food out of that 5 rupees, and they drank a lot of wine, and they started singing and jumping and dancing. Though that dead body was on the funeral stage, the dead body was not yet had reached to the cremation area, and at the same time they were enjoying a lot. They were singing, jumping and dancing. So this is the actual reality of the story. We can say this is the basic poverty which shows over here, the poverty of faith of Budhia, the poverty of Kishu and Madhav, the poverty of understanding, the poverty in reality, and actually the poverty of the emotionalism also. So Kafan is actually the most controversial, the oppositional story. Premchandji signified that caste-ridden society is the evil of the society, which is the outcome of behavior and attitude. Look, why these things happen, why they were dumb, why they were indifferent, or why they were that much hungry and enjoying, because they were dumb, because they were we can say they were not in a condition to understand the feeling of the mother or the feeling of the wife. They were that much indifferent because they were caste ridden. The story actually shows the note of deep anguish. Look, it's a deep pain that could be shown over here, and tragedy in the society. Why this thing happens? Because it is a part of tragic society. The society creates the caste discriminations. This is the upper class, they can get the knowledge, they can become happy, they can get food, they can get the opportunities. These are the people of lower class. They were Dalits, they were not given the privileges, or they were not given the food, or they were not provided education, or they were kept aside. Certain things create strong caste system. During Premchandji's period of time, we had written the date over there, 1886, and much more afterwards, chronological dates. So that was the actual period of time when Premchandji had found the strong conservative orthodox caste system in India, and that was represented in his this story Kafan. Look, the oppressive lives of Dalits are interpreted here. The oppressive lives shows that how they were oppressed, how they were kept marginalized, how they were kept without any benefits, and that is why they were known to be the underprivileged. Ideology and the story. Many critics believed that Kafan was an anti-Dalit story, as if the ridiculed life is presented. Look, it is actually the reality that it is not an anti-Dalit story, but actually it is the realistic story of the Dalit people who had been suffering over that period of time during that strong Indian caste system. But like Mahatma Gandhi, Munshi Premchand ji had profound sympathy for the deprived people. Look, he had the sympathy. He had shown his sympathy in Nirmala. If you had read Nirmala, you would feel that Nirmala was a genuine character who had suffered a lot due to strong conservative Indian society, strong marginalized Indian society towards females. The female who were compulsorily had to marry with the old aged person. Nirmala's husband was very aged person, and he had 3 sons already, and she was a quite young girl, and she had to marry him. So you can mention Premchandji's other books also if you had read any other short story, or if you had gone to if you had taken chance to read Nirmala or Godan or Gaban. These are the 3 main works which are internationally famous. That's why I am speaking frequently these 3 names. You should know, because you are the people of compulsory English learning literature, so you should know about some of the works of international popularity. But people in North India during 1930 were very much influenced by Mahatma Gandhi ji. Munshi Premchand ji, he was the first writer of the upper caste who voiced the sufferings of the Dalits. Look, he is coming from the upper class society, and still he had mentioned this beautiful story of Dalits, how they suffered, the liberation of the untouchability and society and isolation suffered by the Dalits in rural India. Tone of the story. Tone refers to the attitude of the writer, the untouchability, feudalism, hypocrisy of the upper class people, indolence and idleness of the poor people, etc. Munshi Premchand ji presented the vivid picture of rural India. Even if they had a handful of grain, they swore off work. They had nothing except 2 pots of clay as worldly possessions in their house. Madhav had married a year before, and his wife was pregnant. That was Budhia. She was suffering from intense pain and agony. Still they remained indifferent and were talking about food. Poverty is directly connected with lack of food and starvation. Their attitude is inhuman and beastly, but Premchand ji condemned the inscrutable outcome of the society, that is the caste system, which derived starvation and poverty. He means to say that starvation and poverty were the outcome of the caste system and not individuals' problem, or individuals. We can't blame the individuals in that case. He means to say that caste system is the greatest evil of India. That's what he wanted to say. The low caste people were denied of education and opportunities for growth, and they remained poor and oppressed. Look, this actually happens. Thus they face poverty and deprivation and starvation. The title of the original story by Premchand ji is Kafan, and it means a cloth which is wrapped around the dead body for the burial or cremation. The title epitomizes the tragic comic story that dealt with a low caste woman who dies of labor pain. This is the picture of Kafan that has shown over here. You can see Budhia dies and taken by the people. Look, people are taking her instead of this Madhav and Gishu. They were passing their time in drinking the wine and eating the food as Budhya had got. So this is the end of the story. So we shall meet afterwards again.